Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of...
What is it?
Do you forget the name of the show?
I forgot it. No, not fighting. I just didn't want to I feel like you force me to say things sometimes.
I know. I get this cadence.
I just felt like I needed to rebel a little bit.
I do a lot of different things for work that are podcasts or shows and different things like that, and I start them all the same way every single time, and I feel like it's a trap. It's a trap to do the same thing all the time. Sometimes it's good to do things differently. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I like to change it up. You are a man that loves your routine.
Partially, yeah, but I also would say that it's a factor of discipline. Everybody needs a certain amount of discipline in their lives. So.
I agree. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I like having a routine. Yeah,
I think in general, if you're gonna be good at jiu-jitsu, you have to have some kind of schedule or routine. We talked about it on a previous podcast, but I think just generally, if you're gonna try to get good at jiu-jitsu, you have to have some discipline, right?
For sure.
I'm trying to think if there's an example of somebody that's completely undisciplined. That's oh man. I
don't know, and I think it would come across as
wild speculation.
Yeah. We don't know anybody personally.
We don't know their life. So today, I think one of the things that we wanted to bring up specifically was we touched on a lot of other dynamics inside of the academy before, but one that we haven't really touched on or approached that we both have experience in is
things that are going to drive your professors crazy.
And the reason why we have specific experience with it is because...
we're both professors.
Yeah, and we've both been teaching jiu-jitsu.
We've been teaching for a long time, and there's things that are just kind of pet peeves. I think some of the things we'll talk about, I'm I don't care, too much, but I know that, some people get a little bit... their panties in a bunch over it.
So yeah, I know, and I think that's one important distinction, so that I don't make any enemies on this episode, or we don't make any enemies, is that these are things that I would say either we've noticed or just in general you'll see instructors notice. So this isn't meant to shame anyone. I mean, if you feel shame because of something that we talk about,
that's not you.
Maybe that's some things you need to sit down and really reflect on.
It's true. It's very true. So what are do you have something that bothers you when you're teaching?
I would say one of the things that bothers me the most is actually if I'm teaching a technique. So this is one you and I were kind of iterating on some of these. One of the ones that actually drives me the most crazy, believe it or not, is if I show a technique and then immediately I just notice that there's people that are paired up and they're just not doing anything. Not even they're not practicing jiu-jitsu, they're just talking. They're not even practicing the move. That drives me crazy. Yeah,
and it's either they're not practicing the move or they are practicing something different, or they're this is what I would do. And honestly, this happens more with higher ranks than it does with the lower ranks. It's if you're teaching in a class, and then you're showing something, and then the higher ranks you look over and then they're just drilling something completely different, and it's just I get it, we've all been there, when we're teaching, it's maybe you go over to a higher ranking people and be hey, here's some extra details or a little bit different things, and give them extra, but it's because they can handle it. But it's I feel it's pretty disrespectful just to blatantly just I'm not gonna do what you showed, because we've all been in classes where it's we're drilling stuff we don't want to drill, or it's you're being taught stuff and I'm I feel this is just not really something that I'm gonna use or whatever, but you showed up to that class, so it's respectful. The respectful thing to do is drill the move.
Yeah, and I think where it bothers,
or at least pretend.
I'm pretty informal, so I don't teach a lot of classes anymore. Yeah. I used to teach a ton, and if you were to come to one of my classes and just not do the techniques, I'd rather you just show up just to train. Yeah. Because it's more distracting. You take my energy, somebody else's energy away. But if you're just not doing anything, it's just practice a move. like by not doing anything, it's like saying like this one's not good for me or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like you need to practice. But to your point about like people drilling something like different, when it being upper belts, it's like when you see like a purple belt or a brown belt, the thing that drives me crazier than doing something completely different actually is whenever somebody is like doing a variation of whatever you showed.
Yes, because I mean, we all know this. Like, if you've been training long enough, there's a lot of variance within techniques that look the same, and it's like, okay, well, like this, whatever I showed might be for this specific like reaction from somebody versus like like you doing a different variant on it, like, or just doing it a different way. And I'm like, yeah, like there'll be times where I've drilled and I'm like, like they're doing it this way. I was like, and I will drill it one time how, like, do the move like one time how like I'm used to doing it, and then just to feel the difference, and then go back, and then I'm gonna continue to drill the way that they showed it. But it's just like sometimes you're like, oh, like, because maybe you'll figure out like, oh, that's a better grip than I've been using, or that's like whatever. But just to have like such an arrogance or a closed mind about it, it's just so.
I think that's where it stems from, and I think that's where why you see it in like the teenage belts. Like teenagers feel like they know it all, and I think we're all probably guilty of this at certain points.
When you say teenage belts, you're talking about like the belts in between, not like
yellow
and orange belts that teenagers would wear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
I thought that's what you meant.
You know me, but the people don't know me.
I wanted to know. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, like just when you're in your teenage years of jiu-jitsu, your adolescence, you feel like you know it all, and it's like I might show a technique where in the Delhi Hiva I grab the leg and I grab it really deep with my arm or something like that, and then you see them drilling by grabbing the pants, and then they're like, oh yeah, I like to do it with the grabbing the pants. Like, well, that's a totally different move. Like what I'm showing is specific to this, and you need this grip for a reason, and like being able to go over, like it's not a matter of like preference when you show like really good instructors. Realistically, like there's a matter of preference when it comes to moves, but when it comes to specific details in a technique, not a move, most instructors will say like do it exactly like this, and you may see variations where somebody does it slightly different, but again, it's a different technique. So if you're going to do my technique the way I'm showing it, you need to do all the details right. Otherwise, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I saw that one once and it didn't work for me or whatever. And it's like, yeah, because you mixed and matched what details you thought were important.
Says the guy who just sees one move one time and like, I got it. Like, and then I have to yell at him about the details. I'm like, no, they said to put your hand here.
It's true. But that's how I am about everything.
Yes.
Right?
No, that's just your personality. And it's not that because details don't matter to you. Like,
It's that I think I'm really smart and I got it. Trust me. But I am one of those people that I don't want to see a technique shown 100 times before I get to drill it. I want to like see it once or twice.
Which is like really what makes this next thing annoying is like when you're like they've shown a move and like let's say you've explained it. So there's two variants. So like there's one time it's like this happens more in kids class, but
I know exactly what you're gonna say.
When I show the move one time and then a kid raises their hand and they're like, Professor, can you show it again? It's like, well, of course. When have I ever just showed you a move one time and then said go?
You don't even finish.
Kids, figure it out.
When you were teaching the Zoom classes during the pandemic, like kids would interrupt you showing the technique to be like, can you show it again? And it's like, she's showing it right now. Like, you don't even know what's going to happen next.
And I have more patience for children because they're children and they're just like figuring out. But like when you show the move like 5 or 6 times and like somebody's like, Professor, can you show it again? It's like, come on, man. Like, let's try it. Because I think for me, and this is my style, is like, I'm going to teach a move. I'm going to like give you guys or give the students like enough time to drill it and figure it out, and it gives me enough time to figure out like, oh, this is what people are messing up, this is what's wrong, this is the detail that they're missing, or like maybe I just even didn't like say something even though I did it. So it's like we're always going to come back to it if you need help, and I'm not just going to leave you high and dry. But so if you've seen the move 5 times and you still need to see it again, one more time is probably not going to
I mean,
help you.
Realistically, whenever an instructor is like, one more time, it's respectful, and I feel like it's become like etiquette to be like, yeah, one more time.
Yeah.
But realistically, when a professor says like one more time and I'm taking class, I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, let me just try it. Let me
figure it out.
You're really great at seeing something and seeing the details and hearing them. Me, I need to basically just like go try it, figure out like all the stuff that's not working, and then be like, okay, now
you don't have the patience or the like just the ability to like actually listen for that long.
I mean, that's your interpretation of it. I would think of it differently in a more positive way. But realistically, I think just from teaching a lot of classes, what I've found is that generally, even as an instructor, you kind of need to get a feel for like what everybody's going to have a problem with. Techniques that I show all the time, even though I know exactly what problems people are going to have, if I go over all the details that I know people are going to mess up, it's not like going over every single one of them before you show the technique is going to fix that for them.
No,
so
it's
you
not.
need to watch
They're going to mess it up anyway, because half the time people start zoning out. Like, because I know I do that. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I hope my partner was paying attention.
And so it's the people that are always like raising the hand and just being like, one more time, can you show it again? Can you show that again? Like,
or asking a question just to ask a question, because it's like,
I knew that's where you're going to go next.
Like a little,
when you said you had two.
Like a goody two-shoe or whatever. Like, it's like you just want to be like, oh, professor, like, look at me, I'm gonna ask a question. And then people say all the time like there aren't any dumb questions, but I'm gonna tell you, there's some dumb questions.
It's whenever it's always the same person too.
Yes.
And not to put somebody on blast, if you like to ask a lot of questions, asking questions is fine.
I love questions when people ask me questions, because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, like maybe I didn't say this the right way, or like maybe I can give you a better explanation. But
I feel like maybe this is out there someplace. So I want to fix this if this is something that maybe you've heard someplace and I'm not aware of it. But I feel like there's a certain amount of people that have read somewhere that after every technique, you should have one question. And it's like, because some of the questions I feel like are literally like as if you told somebody, you have to make up a question for this.
Well, yeah, it's the people that just the question they're asking is literally just repeating back what you said in the form of a question. And it's like, so we need to grab the collar like this or something. I don't know. I can't even think of it right now. But it's like they're just like just to be heard, like seen.
And you can tell specifically whenever the question, like you said, there's no dumb questions, when the question doesn't make sense, where it's like you show a guard pass and then they're like, and so like, how is this different than like a double leg? And you're like, the guard pass, how it's different than
because one is a takedown,
a double leg takedown. And they're like, yeah, so how are they different? As our dog runs into the camera. So how are they different? And then you're like, they're just different techniques that serve completely different purposes in the same way that a dog is different from a camera. Like, so this is the best I can do.
Toast.
And I think that's, like you mentioned, like the goody two shoes or whatever. But it's like, I don't know. It's weird because I see that in the kids too. But the kids do it because they just like want your attention. The kids are like, oh,
they're
like
children. It's okay.
I have a question, Professor Jena. And then my favorite is whenever a kid is like, ask you a question in the kids class and they go blank.
Yes. They're like, oh, me. And they're like,
that spotlight is hot on them. I forgot my question.
Like, okay, let's just do the move, and then you can remember later.
Anyway, I just think that in general, it's funny because I think the kids are almost more transparent sometimes whenever they're asking like their questions.
Yes, and like I said, like it's endearing when children are doing that because it's just like they're just excited to be there. At least they're trying to participate and not just like off in like a different world. And
I don't want to make it seem like don't ask questions because actually
no ask questions.
I will say
there's a lot of good questions.
Though I will say one of the things that is sort of like I do appreciate, so like this is about things we dislike, but I do appreciate whenever you are showing a technique and somebody has good questions that are practical. Because I think it makes you a better instructor.
But here's a great example of a question to not ask because like why?
Yes.
But how would you counter that move? we're not working on the counter right now, okay? Like, maybe if you wanna answer or get the answer to that question, you know what? We're all available for private lessons.
I feel like that's a really green question, but it's like just fundamental to jiu-jitsu. Like, somebody's gonna ask that question, especially when it's submissions. I feel like you show a submission and somebody's like, well, how would you get out of that? And it's like, well, that's not the point of today's class. Like, it's a completely different class.
Yeah, and then, you know, you can start to figure things out, like, in sparring on, like, because everybody's is gonna try and do that move later in class, so you're gonna have an opportunity to try and figure out the defense, and then come to me with questions on that.
And I think that one of the things I always encourage people to do is, like, people always say, like, oh, don't try to do the move that you just learned in class and rolling. I'm a big proponent of that. I always say, like,
it's fresh in your mind.
It's fresh in your mind, and that's when you're going to get to see, like, does somebody, like, step out of the technique? Do they, pass your guard? Like, you need to know what you're doing. Like,
and then you can ask the questions of, like, I messed this up. This isn't working for me. What am I doing wrong? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can kind of,
And you shoot all those students in the foot that are basically going to work on that technique in class if you immediately just are like, so here's an armbar, and then, hey, everybody, that armbar, here's exactly how to counter it.
Yes. Yeah, because then nobody gets an opportunity to even work any of it, really.
And I think that the variation of that question that is probably one of my least favorite, because I used to get this all the time whenever we taught in St. Louis, and I taught the teens class, which was like teenagers. I mean, you know how they are, but they would always ask, well, what happens if they do that, if they do something else, where it's like you're showing like a pass, let's say, and you're like, and then the person gets on their side, so you finish like this, and they're like, well, what if they go the other way? And you're like, well, let's work on this way, and then we can work on the other way, but this is how you do on this side. And then it's like, well, yeah, but then what if they go to half guard instead? And it's like, well, what if they fight back with jiu-jitsu? Like, that's what we're working on here. It's like we're working on one of the many things they might do.
Yes.
Like, we can't do all 10 now.
Yes, and I think it's important to go, you're going to, like, most of the time you have a game plan of, like, we're going to work this and this and this, and, like, maybe different responses to a technique, and kind of go down the line of like how it's gonna go, the flow. But then, like, when everybody's like moving ahead, it's like, just calm down. Like, can we just work this position first? So really, truly, when I say, does anybody have any questions before we start, what I mean is, do you have any questions about what I just showed right now? This move.
The details. How to make it work better.
Yes. That's what I mean. I feel like most professors mean that. I don't know. I can't speak for everyone.
Can't speak for everybody.
I can't speak for everyone, but when I'm teaching, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and I think I mean it really is one of those things where it's like, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for well over a decade, and I'm still figuring out, like, what to do when the person does something else. It's like, that's jiu-jitsu. And when you ask those questions, because I will even see upper belts ask that sometimes, well, what if they do this or that? And it's kind of like, well, I mean, then you have to do something different. And it's like, do you want me to show everybody, like, more stuff now? Because it's like, no one's even practiced the first thing yet.
I think that's like the probably like the real problem there is that now it's like, okay, well, now I have to show it. If to answer your question, I have to show a different move. So everybody's gonna forget the details of the one that we haven't got a chance to drill yet, and then we got to move, and then I have to show another move. And so it's like just wasting time versus, like, let's drill this, and then we can come back to your question afterward.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I look at it.
And I think, speaking of wasting time, one of the things, and this, I would say this is way more specific to probably teaching children, or maybe like adolescents in general, but it's like the completely, like, disinterested child.
Yeah. That one's really hard to handle. Even worse than, like, in a class is, like, when you have to do a private class with somebody who just doesn't want to be there, a child, really. And then, like, I've done privates with, like, children that don't want to be there at all, and the whole time I feel like I'm just babysitting because they won't listen to me. They're, like, rolling around, like, even if they're doing the move, they're not really practicing. It's like, frustrating. It's really frustrating because it's just one of those things that's like, I mean, I guess I'm getting paid, but is it worth it?
I used to always tell people, like, actually teaching children is a joy. Like teaching kids that are, like, actually engaged in jiu-jitsu. It's like...
Oh, yeah, it's fun.
I love jiu-jitsu. Like, I love to teach it. I mean, I don't teach a ton of private lessons. I don't teach any private lessons anymore. When people ask, I'm always just, like, show up to class and I'll show you stuff afterwards, because I just don't want to sell my time for that, because it's so difficult and frustrating in many cases. But when you actually are teaching kids, it can be a joy. But it's the ones like that you got to get paid for, man.
They take your joy. They steal it. They steal your joy.
Joy stealers. And I think it's the kids that are basically just like, you can tell, like, they don't have an interest in martial arts. And, like, that might be why the parents brought them.
There's a difference between a child who is just, like, just not paying attention that day, doesn't maybe doesn't want to show up or doesn't want to be there that day. Kid. But a kid that you're forcing. I mean, we had kids show up recently. This is kind of like, I think I told you about this, but it was like 2 kids, and their mom was bringing them, and I think they were just like on a week trial, and they came every day to class, and while I was trying to get them to, like, just bow in and out, like, that's it. And they wouldn't even do that. They wouldn't look me in the eye. They wouldn't, I mean, it was like, it was very bizarre, because I don't even know how to handle it. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, they won't even look at me when I'm telling them what they should do, and I'm trying to get them to, like, just go through the warm-ups, and the kid just runs off the mat, and I'm like, no, you can't just leave. And I told him, you can't leave. So then they just sit on the wall, and I can't get them to do...
you did tell me about this.
I couldn't get them to do anything. It was just like siblings, and they just sat there the whole time. And the mom is right there, and I'm like, I can't physically force your child to do this without maybe, like, abusing them.
Are they, like, done jiu-jitsu yet?
No, that's not even the kind of people they were. It was a weird
They were weirder than that.
It was a weird
And one thing I think that is common and is different than this is, like, there are definitely kids that are just completely uninterested over the long term in jiu-jitsu, where you're like, why are you even bringing them? Because it's not even that they are not interested, it's that they hate it. Like,
yeah.
And they like almost willfully, like, are disengaged. And I think that's something where it's like, hey, I know you probably think it's good for your kid, but realistically, like, get them into something they're more interested in. Like, get them to play an instrument, I don't know, get them to do something, try stuff. But
yes.
The weird kid, like, I mean, I gotta say, like, martial arts are something that you put a kid in when they're, you know, like, you have all kinds of this, like, long spectrum of things, from both disabilities all the way over to just the kids into weird stuff or unathletic or whatever. Mm-hmm. Parents will put their kids into martial arts, and that's just something you have to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times they do it for, like, the discipline, the respect of it all. Like, that's, like, kind of what martial arts teaches. But there's times that I just want to beat children when they're in my class because they're being so disrespectful. I'm like, I don't know how to make them listen without maybe physically harming them. Story time real quick. And this is one of my this is one of my favorite stories ever. It's on the topic, but I think it's just fun to tell. And it's remember there was a kid, and he came in, and this was not whenever we were in San Diego. I feel like I know what you're going to say.
And the kid was very athletic. He was very strange. He came in with what I was assuming was his grandpa.
Yeah.
You know exactly where I'm going with this story. So you were actually we weren't actually.
We were it was the day I was teaching that one.
But you knew the kid, right?
Yes. Because he was interesting. He was fun.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't want to be mean about a child, but he was just he was different than most.
But he talked a lot, right?
Yes, he did.
So he's going through warm-ups, and this is told to me secondhand by somebody that I'll not name just for the sake of anonymity across the board. So the kid's being all weird, super unathletic, and they're doing... they're going through the warm-ups, and at one point they have to do forward rolls, right?
I think it was forward roll, yeah.
And the kid goes to do a forward roll, basically like trip forward rolls, and then before he even like finishes the roll, just screams, "Pop!"
Your hands are cold.
"Pop, I broke my arm!"
I think it was his leg. He brought, or I don't remember. He broke something, a limb.
Oh, and then to call an ambulance.
Call an ambulance.
Like before
like in the middle of class, just screaming, "Pa, call an ambulance! It's broken." It's like, turns out it was broken.
That's what the funniest part is to me. Is the kid just freaked out?
But he was like 9. Pa, call an ambulance.
Pa broke my leg, call an ambulance. And it's like, this kid, he's just weird, and we're like, he's hamming it up, whatever. Turns out kid broke his leg. So
He broke it.
Sometimes kids break their legs. That's not something that's a pet peeve. Weird kids are fine too. Just fun story.
Also, I don't abuse children. I enjoy teaching children. I just wanted to point that out.
Allegedly. And but yeah, I think in general with you can separate, I think, the things that are just dealing with kids in general as an instructor, I think probably don't differ from any other profession, like a teacher or whatever. There are some things I think are specific to jiu-jitsu, but I think, with adults, you just kind of expect people to know better.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think another area where it's you expect people to know better is basically the knuckleheads that make the same mistakes training over and over again. The people that always are having problems are the guy that's always maybe cranking an arm bar too long or something like that. And in some cases,
always taking up the whole mat every time he's sparring.
Always going off the mat, running into other people, just completely unaware. And I think we addressed some of this in the people you'll meet at Jiu-Jitsu podcast or whatever.
For sure.
But I think as an instructor, it's frustrating whenever, especially if you pull somebody aside.
How many times I was to be dude, just watch your space or whatever. Just the lack of, I don't know, being better after I've told you. But
I think that goes for pretty much everything that was on the list of that podcast, the smelling gi guy and all that stuff. If your instructor comes up to you and is like, hey man, you need to wash your gi, and then you show up to class a week, even just a week later, even if it's not even immediately, it's you basically were hey man, clean your gi, and then they're got it, not gonna do that.
Yes.
Because it's come on,
just be respectful too, because it's not most of the stuff, it's not the structure and the things that we ask of people aren't necessarily just for you or for me, my benefit. It's for the benefit of the whole class, so everything can, you can just respect each other. And I'm getting bit up with my hands right now because he is uninterested in his bone now. Sorry. Dogs
are the best. The thing I think that's interesting about just that entire dynamic too is as an instructor is, I think in most of those instances, having done jiu-jitsu for a long time, you're trying to help that person. It's I mean, some cases about the other people too, but realistically,
I want the best for every student. So if I'm telling you something, it's because I want you to be able to be better.
It's listen, you're going to run out of training partners, or no one's going to want to train with you, or whatever it is, because knowing that, those are things that they might not recognize. So it's the instructor is there to not just to teach you moves in many instances, it's to help you be guided through jiu-jitsu. That's why you can't, even if you could just learn moves on the internet, you would miss out on this other big portion of jiu-jitsu that you get through an instructor and honestly a school.
Just having that community, and then having somebody there guiding you, because you could be drilling something. If you watch something online and you're oh, I'm gonna try this move, and you could be drilling it completely wrong, and now you have just this whole you've got this muscle memory of doing it wrong. Oh,
that brings to mind immediately something that we didn't talk about before, but something that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. It's the.
I saw this on YouTube.
It's the Ison on YouTube, but even more than that, it's somebody that's watched whoever it is, it doesn't matter, somebody that's really popular in jiu-jitsu, but to the masses, a Eddie Bravo, or even now, even jiu-jitsu people are getting super popular, Gordon Ryan, and they come to class, they're a white belt, they're oh, I saw I saw the new whatever technique, you know, from the John Danaher DVD or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they're like trying to show you it, or they're trying to show other people it during class, or they're like asking about it. Like you're trying to show like basic back take, and this is like their second month at jiu-jitsu, and they come like once a week, and they're like asking about like advanced jiu-jitsu, and you're like, yeah, man, like you just need to figure out how to like get the back right now.
We gotta set the foundation first.
You got your pants on backwards, homie. Fun fact, I wore my pants backwards for a month when I first started training jiu-jitsu.
Kids do that a lot. Or wear their gis inside out.
It does. I mean, jiu-jitsu. There's no other pants that you wear that are like jiu-jitsu pants. I don't know how we decided like these pants have to be different from all other pants.
How are you tying them? The ties would be the backwards. Did you just wrap it around?
I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Again, what other pants are? It's like, well, put the strings through the loops and then tie it, like a gunny sack. I don't know. I feel like I'm alone on this one. That's fine. Not a hill I'm gonna die on, but I'm just saying, like, jiu-jitsu pants. I mean, Sprawl tried to fix that a long time ago, and I feel like no one was into it.
I don't know what they did.
I think they're out of business now, so I think we know what they did. Nothing good. Sprawl used to be like a big deal back in the day. Whatever happened to them?
I don't know. We could look it up.
Not
they
gonna.
might still be making things.
Yeah. So the people that get on YouTube and are just basically like experts, I feel like that's who's buying half the DVDs in jiu-jitsu too, by the way. It's like people that like show up to class like once a week, or like definitely white belts and blue belts. And I don't know. I just, it's like, why are you trying to learn like advanced stuff on the internet whenever you can't even do the basic stuff in class?
Because it's so much more exciting to like learn how to heel hook than it is to learn how to break fall.
I'm actually cool with like learning how to heel hook, but it's like you need to learn like how to heel hook before you can learn how learn how to do it from like single leg X, where you take the guy over to this position. Like you need to learn all those positions and how to play those guards before you can like.
Just need a foundation. You need a foundation to learn. So, or if like, you know, you're a high level guy, I don't know. For me, I'm just somebody that's like, I get annoyed when people are like, oh, I watched this and they want to ask me a question about it. I'm like, do you have it right now? Can I watch what they did? Because you trying to teach me what they did is probably not the same as me watching what they did. And then the fact that you would just think that I just know exactly how this person is teaching it. Guess what? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of innovation in jiu-jitsu, and there's a lot of techniques that I don't know and still have yet to learn, or, you know, things, because I feel like that's what's great about jiu-jitsu. You're never done learning. There's always something else that you can be added to your game or to your like knowledge. So like just why would you expect that I just know that what you're talking about? Like I don't know.
And I feel like
trying to explain to me more when I'm doing like this to you. Like know that if I'm looking at you like that, I'm like, I don't care. Just shut up and then we can move on.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen people ask you those questions before and just like speed right past like the social cues that you give them.
I know. I feel like I'm very like it's easy to tell what I'm thinking. I say it on my face. So,
but this like combines like multiple things, and it's a great wrap up. But it's like the person that is basically like, oh, I have a question, and you're like, oh, I'm sure as an instructor it's about the technique that I just showed, since I asked any questions about that technique, and they're like, nope, about something totally different. You know, in the Johnny Tama DVD, whenever he's getting the Tama lock from quarter guard, how he steps over the leg, like how do you make sure that the guy doesn't essentially roll you over from here?
Does it from there,
I know, but I'm just kidding. And you're like, I don't know. And then you try to patronize them. You're like, can you show me? And it's always the best, too, whenever they name a move, which I know what the Tama lock is. I know Johnny Tama. Shout out Johnny Tama. But, like, it's whenever they're like, do you know the backwards hammer lock that so-and-so does? And you're like, nope, not even kind of, completely unaware of what that is. I know you think that I know because you're on the internet a lot more than me. But
I don't even know, like, the names of moves that are, like, mainstream.
Yeah, a
lot of times I'm like, oh, that's what you call that?
Yeah. We still call the freaking lasso the bicep cutter all the time. Oh, I do. I call it
You
the
do?
cutter. Yeah, because I don't know. When I learned it, it was only because like the only reason you would do this is so you can get a bicep slicer. It's the only reason why people were doing the lasso when I was like a white belt and everybody else was like, our instructor was a black belt in Sambo and a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu when I started. So we did lots of stupid moves. A lot. But yeah, like, and then you come over and you're like, well, can you show me? And then what you watch is basically like watching a child trying to reassemble something that they've broken with glue, where it's like they're trying to fit the pieces back together and they're like, I think this is where it goes. And you're like, no way, that's where that fits. And like,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, I don't know, probably just need to see it. And they're like, it's on his whatever DVD. And you're like, yeah, I didn't even know he had more than one. So like, sorry.
Yep. Yeah. People are great. They really are.
But that's the thing about jiu-jitsu is I think, like, in general, like, jiu-jitsu, by attending class and just learning over time, it'll teach you a lot just about yourself and about, like, how to learn properly. Pretty much, I would say everything that I've listed here, with maybe a few exceptions, I've been guilty of as a student at some point. And I think that that's just naturally part of it. These things
For
are...
sure.
I mean,
we're here to educate you guys, so you don't annoy your professors.
So you don't fall into those traps.
And also, if you've done these things, like, nobody hates you. I mean, there's a few egregious ones where I'd be like, maybe I do, but no, but nobody hates you. Like, you can overcome it.
It's true. You can overcome it. And I think that, that's the takeaway from this is if you're listening to this and you're not a jiu-jitsu instructor, you're probably like, do my jiu-jitsu instructor really actually hate me? And the answer is probably not. I mean, I can't speak for them. Can't speak for them. But these are the traps that students will fall into. And I think as an instructor, those things can be frustrating along the way. And if you are a jiu-jitsu instructor and you're listening to this, there's probably like multiple things you're like, oh, you're leaving out the thing about private lessons when the person shows up and then you're like, did you bring a partner? And then they're like, no. And then all they want to do is throws.
Or just spar. And you're like, I've taught 6 private lessons today, trained, and 3 kids classes. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure that there's things that we've left off. And if those are things that drive you crazy, leave it in the comments, YouTube or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. If you have a chance, leave us a review on any of the podcast platforms. Those things are awesome, and they continue to help us grow and develop the podcast. So super, super grateful for all of our listeners and everybody that joins each week. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.